When you stop moving, everything catches up you, weren't prepared for what happened when everything finally got quiet. You told yourself all you needed was rest, a break, a reset, some time to breathe. That once the noise stopped, once the notifications disappeared and the deadlines faded, you'd finally feel like yourself again. But you didn't, because the silence didn't bring peace. It brought something else, something heavier. The moment you slowed down, the moment you stopped, even for a second, it all caught up. Not the world, not time, the version of you that you've kept at bay through busyness and motion. The one who stares at the ceiling at 2 a.m. and doesn't know what they're doing anymore. The one who can smile in front of everyone and still feel like they're disappearing behind their own face. That version waits for you in the stillness, and when you stop, it doesn't knock, it just enters. You used to think movement was progress, that the next task, the next achievement, the next place would carry you out of this fog. That if you just did enough, proved enough, pleased enough, you'd feel full again, whole. But what if all that movement was just hiding? What if the treadmill you're on, the one that exhausts you, drains you, but never seems to take you anywhere, was never about going forward? What if it was about running away? Stillness reveals that because when you stop, the echo arrives at first. It's subtle. A restlessness in your limbs, a shallow breath, the itch to check your phone, to open a window, to do something, anything, because in that silence, something ancient begins to whisper, and the whisper is not kind. It says things you've kept buried for years, memories you never fully processed, fears you didn't name, realizations too sharp to carry during the day. You don't know who you are anymore. You've been on autopilot for months. You feel nothing, and it scares you, and worse of all, you're afraid that if you stop for too long, there'll be nothing left of you. That's the truth most people won't admit. It's not that they're too busy to rest. It's that they're terrified of what will show up when they do. Because stillness doesn't give you clarity. Stillness gives you a mirror, and it's not a mirror you can fix with makeup, lighting, or affirmation. It reflects your inner weather. The storm you've been pretending isn't there. The drought you've ignored by staying distracted. The fog that's made your life feel like a blur of days stacked on top of each other, with no center, no meaning, and when you sit down with it, that silence, it sits down with you too, but it doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in weight. You feel it in your body, in the slump of your shoulders, in the hollowness behind your chest, in the way your hands hang like they've forgotten what to reach for. It's not depression, not exactly, not sadness either. It's emptiness, and emptiness is cruel, because it doesn't scream, it just remains. You've convinced yourself that if you could just get through this week, this month, this season, everything would realign. But that's not what's happening, is it? You're not waiting for the world to slow down. You're waiting for your soul to wake up. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped hearing it. It didn't leave. It didn't die. It just got quieter, drowned beneath the noise you thought you needed. But now the noise is gone. You've turned off the world. The lights are dim. The notifications are silenced. The room is still. And now you're alone with yourself. And you realize something. You don't know how to be with yourself. You know how to be useful. You know how to be entertaining. You know how to be productive. You know how to be needed. But how to simply be, that terrifies you. Because when there's nothing to perform for, nothing to prove, and no one to applaud, you start to question if you exist at all. And that question, that unspeakable, almost blasphemous question, haunts the stillness like a shadow that stretches with the night. What if I am nothing unless I am doing something? What if your entire sense of worth was built on movement? What if you've never actually felt yourself, only your momentum? Stillness isn't peace. Not at first. It's withdrawal. It's withdrawal from the dopamine of accomplishment, from the numbness of busyness, from the chemical illusion that action equals identity. And withdrawal always hurts. You feel it in the ache behind your eyes, in the dull tension in your jaw, in the weight of your limbs when you try to rest and instead feel like you're sinking into a black hole with no gravity. You're not lazy, you're grieving the version of yourself who thought the chase would lead somewhere, grieving the life you built around noise, grieving the realization that silence doesn't heal you until it breaks you first. But there is something else beneath the terror, a flicker, a subtle pulse, like a candle deep in a cave, untouched by wind. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it waits, because stillness doesn't want to hurt you, it wants to find you, the real you, the one beneath the roles, beneath the doing, beneath the panic and pressure, the one you abandoned when the world told you that being was never enough. Stillness is not your enemy, it is your homecoming, but first, you have to let it take you apart. The silence that accuses you always thought silence was supposed to be peaceful. But when everything finally quiets down, when the last ping fades, the last conversation dies, and even your thoughts stop scrambling, you notice it. That silence doesn't soothe you, it stares back at you. It accuses, not loudly. It doesn't scream or demand. It doesn't shake you by the shoulders and tell you you've failed. It does something worse. It just sits there, watching, and in that stillness, you feel exposed. Like the air around you has peeled back the thin skin of distraction you used to hold yourself together. Now, there's nothing between you and yourself. No work, no people, no noise, just the echo of a question you haven't been willing to ask. Why do you feel so empty? You wouldn't say it out loud. You don't even admit it to yourself most days. You're too functional for that. You wake up, you eat, you do the things that are expected of you. You show up, you laugh when people make jokes. You ask them how they're doing, and sometimes you even mean it. But then you come home, you lie down, you turn the lights off, and for a few seconds, before you fall asleep, you can feel it. That haunting, shapeless weight. It's not pain. Pain would at least feel alive. This is something else. This is the absence of something that should be there. A hollowness that's not just emotionally, it's almost physical. It sits beneath your ribs. A quiet vacuum. A ghost, and it whispers. You can't distract yourself forever. This isn't new. It's been with you for years. Maybe it started as just a vague numbness. Maybe it arrived suddenly after loss, or heartbreak, or a brutal season of burnout. Or maybe it was always there. You just got better at ignoring it. Like when a faucet drips just slowly enough that you only hear it. When everything else is quiet, you call it stress, fatigue, mental clutter. But deep down, if you really listen, you know better, it's emptiness. And the moment you stop chasing, stop running, stop achieving, stop performing, that's when it finally catches up. You've spent so long filling your time that you've forgotten how to be in time. You've become a master of motion. You keep your calendar full. You say yes to things you don't care about. You refresh your feed even when you've seen it all. You buy things to feel something. You stay Busy because stillness feels like death, and in a way, it is. A kind of psychological death. Because when you're still, the parts of you you've buried begin to stir. Memories, longings, old wounds, regrets, unfulfilled desires, questions you don't have answers to. All of it, the moment you're still. Those ghosts gather, and they don't scream. They whisper. They whisper things like, "What have you really done with your life? If you stopped trying to prove yourself, who would be left? Are you actually loved, or just tolerated? If everything you do disappeared, would you still matter?" These questions don't announce themselves. They creep in like fog. They coat everything in quiet dread. Stillness makes you listen, but it doesn't always tell you what you want to hear. Psychologists call it anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. But that's not quite it, is it? It's not that you feel nothing. It's that even the things you used to love now feel far away, like echoes. Food tastes like habit. Music becomes background noise. Even joy is diluted, thin like air at high altitudes. You're not sad, you're not angry, you're just hollow. And society tells you that can't be real because you have so much, because you're doing well, because others have it worse, because you should be grateful. But gratitude doesn't fill a soul that has lost its connection to meaning. And that's the real pain of stillness. It forces you to realize how disconnected you've become. Not just from others, from yourself, from the parts of you that used to burn with wonder, from the child you once were, who didn't need a reason to smile, from the quiet knowing that your life matters, even when no one sees it. You've forgotten all of that, and the silence reminds you. Stillness is sacred. But sacred doesn't mean safe. The sacred is dangerous. It requires reverence. It strips you down. It demands truth. When you sit in stillness long enough, you realize you are not at war with the world. You are at war with your own avoidance. Avoidance of your grief. Avoidance of your loneliness. Avoidance of your insignificance. Avoidance of the possibility that no matter how much you achieve, it will never be enough. Not because you're broken, but because you were never meant to become enough. Through doing, you were meant to be, but being is terrifying, especially in a world that worships motion. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat alone, without a screen, without a to-do list, without trying to be productive, and felt at peace? When was the last time you looked in the mirror and didn't feel like a stranger? When was the last time silence felt like a friend, not a threat? It's not that you're broken. It's that you've been taught to fear your own stillness. Because when you stop moving, you might discover you've been running in circles your entire life. Or worse, you might realize you've never even left the starting line. You've just been spinning endlessly to distract yourself from the feeling that no matter where you go, you are still with yourself, and that's what terrifies you most. But there is something honest in this terror, something pure. The feeling of emptiness is not the end, it's a beginning, it's a doorway. The silence that accuses you is also the silence that invites you to stop hiding, to stop numbing, to finally listen. Because beneath the echoes and ghosts and questions, there is something still alive, a quiet flame. It's not loud, it doesn't beg, but it's there, waiting, waiting for you to stop, pretending, waiting for you to come home. The ache beneath the accomplishment you, done everything you were supposed to do. You followed the blueprint, the checklist that was handed to you, before you could even question who wrote it. You studied hard, you got the job, you made people proud, you stayed polite, worked late, earned praise. You put your head down and kept moving. And for a while, that was enough. Each accomplishment gave you a little hit of something that felt like meaning. The promotion, the recognition, the carefully curated smile from someone who finally saw you. It felt like progress. But now, sitting alone in the quiet, you realize something devastating. None of it touched the emptiness. You kept thinking the next thing would. That if you just made it to the next milestone, the ache would finally go away. That success would silence the question gnawing at you, but it didn't. Because you weren't chasing meaning. You were chasing relief. Relief from the quiet panic that no matter what you do, it won't be enough. Not for them, not for the world, not for the world, not even for you. You tell yourself it's normal, that everyone feels this way sometimes. That life is just like this. A cycle of grinding and coping, with brief interruptions of joy you can't hold on to. But is that really what you believe? Or have you just gotten so used to feeling hollow that you've mistaken it for reality? You've become fluent in the language of achievement. You know how to speak in bullet points and results. You know how to turn yourself into a resume. But ask yourself, when was the last time you felt alive? Not stimulated, not distracted, not entertained. Alive, the kind of alive that has no audience, no trophy, no post, just the quiet, radiant hum of existing in your own skin and believing that it's enough. You can't even remember, can you? Because you've been surviving on performance. Every part of your life has become a stage, and you're the actor, the crew, the writer, and the critic all at once. You perform success, you perform happiness, you perform connection, you perform being okay, but deep inside, behind the curtain, you're crumbling, and the tragedy is, you don't even know who you're performing for anymore. That's the secret, no. One talks about achievement is a mask that eventually grows into your face, and once it does, you can't tell where you end and the performance begins. You smile at dinner parties and feel the emptiness swallowing your voice. You cross items off your to-do list like a machine, wondering why nothing feels done. You hit the goals, you get the praise, but in the back of your mind, a voice whispers, why doesn't this feel real? Because it's not rooted. You've built a life in the air, suspended on the expectations of others, the approval of the crowd, the safety of routine. But nothing has touched the ground of your being. Nothing has reached the place that aches, in the silence. Not because you're incapable of depth, but because you've never been shown how to find it. You were taught to climb, not to dig. You were taught to accumulate, not to connect. You were taught to impress, not to feel, and so you became efficient, productive, brilliant even, but spiritually malnourished. And now you've stopped, for the first time in a long time, and you realize you don't know who you are beneath all the doing. That realization is terrifying, but it's also a door, because what if the ache beneath your accomplishments isn't proof that you're broken? What if it's your soul refusing to be pacified? What if it's the part of you that still remembers what joy felt like before it had to be earned? What if it's the child version of you, small, wide-eyed, unfiltered, tugging on your sleeve saying, this isn't what we wanted, is it? You've ignored that voice for a long time. You've told it to be quiet, to grow up, to get in line. But here, in this stillness, it has returned. Not to shame you, to remind you that somewhere along the way, you traded wonder for structure. You traded spontaneity for control. You traded your being for your resume. End now. You want it back. But here's the catch. You don't know how. You want to feel again, but don't trust your emotions. You want to rest, but guilt coils around your spine every time you try. You want to be, but you were never taught what being meant outside of doing. So you sit here, full of contradictions, longing for peace, afraid of quiet, desperate for connection, terrified of intimacy, hungry for meaning, exhausted by the search, and that's where emptiness begins. Not in failure, but in success without presence. You succeeded. You made it. You became what the world asked of you, and in the process, you lost something essential. Not your passion, not your creativity, not even your sense of purpose. You lost your permission to simply be. But here, in this stillness, you have a chance to reclaim it, not by doing more, not by fixing yourself, not by chasing another version of success with a spiritual label slapped on top, but by sitting with this truth. You don't need to earn your existence. You don't need to outrun your emptiness. You don't need to prove you matter. You already do. You are here, and perhaps the ache beneath your accomplishments isn't a flaw. It's the beginning of your return. A return to the you that was never built for performance. A return to the ground beneath all that ambition. A return to being. The hunger that no achievement can feed. You're not starving for success. You're starving for something success can't touch. That's the thing about emptiness. It hides behind what looks like fulfillment. On the outside, you check every box. You're accomplished, reliable, maybe even admired. People look at you and say, you're doing great. And maybe, for a moment, you believe them. But then night falls, the crowd disappears, and the applause fades into the kind of silence that's louder than sound. And there it is again, the hunger. But this isn't the hunger of ambition. This isn't the drive to do more, be more, or prove more. This is the hunger that comes when nothing you've done has reached the part of you that feels starved. A soul-level famine. You try to name it. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's burnout. But none of those words quite hold it, do they? Because this isn't just a lack of energy. It's a lack of connection. A sense that everything you touch turns to vapor. A slow realization that even the things you once loved, music, laughter, quiet mornings, now pass through you without leaving a trace. You eat and still feel empty. You sleep and still feel tired. You're surrounded by people and still feel alone. It's not that you can't feel. It's that your feelings feel thin, like shadows of what they used to be, like echoes of meaning. Long after the meaning left the room, so you try to fix it. You dive into productivity. You start a new project. You sign up for another course. You tweak your diet. You rearrange your furniture. You convince yourself that this is what you've been missing, but nothing sticks. Nothing lasts. Because this hunger isn't physical. It's existential. It's not asking for food or money or even comfort. It's asking for wholeness. But you don't know where to find that. Because no one taught you how to feed your soul. They only taught you how to feed your schedule. You see, society doesn't reward stillness. It punishes it. You're told that if you're not growing, you're dying. That if you're not busy, you're lazy. That rest is earned and idleness is shameful. So you keep moving. You keep proving. You keep piling your plate higher and higher with things that look impressive but taste like nothing. And the more you consume, the more you crave. It's not your fault. You've been conditioned to believe that value comes from output. That identity is built by what you do, not who you are. That if you just optimize yourself enough, if you just stay productive enough, the emptiness will eventually give up and leave. But it doesn't, because the hunger wasn't created by lack of effort, it was created by disconnection from self. So, now you're here. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded. And it still wasn't enough. And that realization hurts. It cuts deeper than any failure ever could. Because if even your best isn't filling you, then what will? That's the question that keeps you up at night. That's the ache that sits inside your chest like a stone you can't swallow. But maybe the question isn't, what will fill me? Maybe it's, what part of me did I abandon in the pursuit of being full? Because somewhere along the way, you stopped asking yourself what you needed. You started asking what the world expected. You traded presence for performance, joy for efficiency, stillness for stimulation. And now, you're starved for yourself. It's not dramatic, it's not even visible, but it's real, and it shows up in the smallest ways. The numb way you scroll through your phone looking for something you can't name, the quiet sadness that hits you when you realize the day is over, and you don't remember feeling any of it. The strange resentment you carry toward people who seem to enjoy life without needing to earn it. You carry it like a ghost that haunts the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. But what if that hunger isn't a flaw? What if it's not a malfunction? What if it's your soul doing exactly what it was designed to do, calling you back, calling you out of the noise, calling you out of the performance, calling you out of the hollow pursuit of becoming enough? Because maybe you were never supposed to achieve your worth. Maybe you were supposed to remember it, and maybe this ache, this slow, quiet, unbearable hunger is what finally breaks the spell, what finally shakes you awake, what finally whispers, come home. Coming home to yourself isn't glamorous. It's not a weekend retreat or a self-help book. It's not a checklist or a 30-day challenge. It's a dismantling. It's sitting in the stillness and letting the hunger speak. It's hearing your own voice tremble as it asks for something real, something that can't be posted or praised. It's facing the terrible, liberating truth that you are not your accomplishments. You are not your efficiency. You are not your output. You are something softer, slower, more sacred, and you don't need to earn the right to feel whole. You just need to stop feeding yourself everything but what you actually need. That's what stillness is here for. It's not here to judge you. It's here to strip away everything that was never you to begin with. It's here to peel off the layers of ambition, obligation, and distraction until all that remains is what's true, not what's impressive, not what's productive, just true. And in that truth, in that rawness, in that terrifying stillness, you begin to feel full again, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to remember that there is a hunger only you can feed, enough to realize that doing nothing might be the most important thing you ever do. Alone in a crowded room, you're surrounded, you always are. The world hums with voices. Your notifications never stop. You respond to texts, attend meetings, hear laughter around the dinner table. People talk to you, smile at you. Some even say they love you, but somehow you still feel alone. And not just alone in the way everyone feels from time to time. Not just lonely on a Friday night or during holidays. You feel alone in your being, as if no one can touch the core of you, not really. Like there's a glass wall between your inner world and the outer one. And the more you try to reach through it, the colder it feels. You know the ache. You felt it even in your happiest moments, a strange shadow that lingers beneath the light. You could be laughing, holding someone's hand, telling a story, and still wonder, why do I feel so distant from this life I'm living? It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being without people, it comes from being without connection. You've become a master of proximity without intimacy. You know how to show up, how to keep things surfacely vol, how to say, I'm fine, with a smile that's practiced and unshakable. You know how to be liked, how to belong, at least on paper, but you don't feel known, because to be known would mean to be seen. Not the polished, pleasant version of you, but the trembling, unfiltered self underneath. The one that doesn't always have the right words. The one that feels too much or not enough. The one that aches for someone to say, you don't have to pretend, but no one says that. Because you don't let them see that version of you. You've built walls, not because you're cold, but because you've been burned, because somewhere, along the line, you learned a devastating lesson. Vulnerability is expensive. Maybe you tried once, maybe you opened your chest and let someone peer in, and maybe they didn't understand. Maybe they looked away. Maybe they used your softness against you, so you stopped. You learned how to be acceptable instead of authentic, how to be included instead of seen, how to be okay instead of real, and over time you lost touch with the language of intimacy. It started to feel foreign, unstable, risky, so now you sit in rooms full of people and feel miles away, not because they don't care, but because you don't know how to let yourself be held, because you don't trust that if someone did see the real you, they'd stay. And yet, in the quiet, that part of you still longs to be seen, not admired, not envied, seen in your doubt, in your fear, in your ordinary. You don't want someone to fix you. You just want them to witness you, to sit beside the aching, confused, unspectacular version of you, and say, you're still worthy. But the world rarely gives us that. It gives us filters, performances, approval ratings. It gives us safety in exchange for silence, and so we choose being palatable over being known. But the cost is connection, and the result is emptiness. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being too distant, but there's another kind that comes from being too guarded. You may be surrounded by people, but your soul can still starve, because intimacy requires risk, presence, the collapse of ego, the courage to say, this is who I am. I hope you'll stay. And when you've lived too long behind masks, even you begin to forget what your face looks like without them. So now, when someone tries to get close, you flinch. Not visibly, not in a way they notice, but deep down, you retreat. You change the subject, you offer them a version of you that feels safe, and then you wonder why no one truly knows you. The truth is, you miss yourself. You miss the version of you that didn't need to hide, the version that believed someone could love you as you are, without pretense. But you don't know how to go back. You've lived too long in this shell. You've memorized your lines. You've mistaken survival for identity. And now, in the stillness, when the noise dies down, when the people are gone, when the lights go out, you're left with someone you barely recognize. You're left with the ache of invisible loneliness, the kind that festers in crowded rooms, behind smiling eyes, and you whisper to yourself, without words, I don't know how to belong anywhere. But maybe belonging doesn't start with others. Maybe it starts with you, with the terrifying act of coming home to your own presence, of looking in the mirror and not turning away, of letting the real you the tired, soft, fractured version, come to the surface without apology, because how can anyone know you if you've buried yourself? How can anyone stay if you've made yourself unreachable? Stillness doesn't just show you the pain of your disconnection. It offers you the first thread back, a chance to sit with yourself and say, I see you. I don't fully understand you yet, but I'm not leaving. That is the beginning of intimacy, and maybe the end of your deepest loneliness. The echo that never ends, there's a sound that plays inside you, even when everything is silent. You don't notice it during the day. There's too much noise, too much movement, too many tasks buffering your mind from its own depths. But in the stillness, when the lights dim, when your body surrenders to the mattress and your mind is no longer occupied by demand, that sound returns, a kind of echo, not of something that once was, but of something that never arrived. It's the ache of an unfinished sentence, the resonance of a life paused mid-thought, the lingering feeling that something was supposed to happen, but didn't. You've carried it for so long that you've stopped questioning it. But tonight, in this silence, you hear it again, not as a noise, but as a presence, a hollow frequency humming from the inside out, and you begin to wonder, what have I been waiting for? That never came. This echo isn't a memory. It isn't grief. It isn't even fear. It's absence. The absence of something essential. Something you were too busy to name. It haunts your quiet moments like an unfinished melody, like a lover who said they'd return but never did. You don't talk about it, because how can you explain the feeling of missing something you never had? How do you describe the ache of an emptiness that doesn't come from loss, but from lack? It's not that something was taken from you. It's that something vital was never given, and now you're left to figure out what it was and why it matters so much. Maybe it was unconditional love. Maybe it was permission to exist without a role. Maybe it was space to explore who you are without being corrected, judged, or redirected. Maybe it was just someone saying, you're allowed to feel this. Whatever it was, it left a shape inside you, and now you try to fill it with everything the world told you would work. You fill it with relationships, with achievements, with goals, with self-improvement, and still the echo remains, because this emptiness was never meant to be filled. It was meant to be understood. But no one teaches you how to sit with absence. They teach you how to reach, how to chase, how to build. They teach you how to move forward, how to stay ahead, how to grind your way to peace, but not how to wait, not how to listen to what hurts, not how to accept that some things you long for may never arrive in the form you imagined. And so you keep reaching, and the reaching becomes your identity. You don't know who you are without the search. You don't know how to rest inside the silence without panicking, because what if it never changes? What if this echo, this empty hum inside your chest is permanent? What if there's no resolution? That's what terrifies you, not the emptiness itself, the possibility that it's always been there, and always will be. You try to push it away, you try to cover it with tasks, with plans, with fantasies of the someday life, the one where everything finally makes sense. But somewhere deep inside, you know the truth. Stillness doesn't end the echo. It just makes it louder, and that's not a punishment, that's an invitation. Because maybe the echo isn't your enemy. Maybe it's the purest part of you, the part that still knows you were meant for more than noise. Maybe the echo is your soul's way of saying, come closer. I've been waiting, so you listen. You lay in the dark, heartbeat slow, breath shallow. You let the echo rise, that hum of unresolved yearning, and instead of drowning it out, you do something radical. You stay, you stop fleeing, you stop fixing, you let it speak, and slowly, painfully, it begins to form words. I don't know who I am. I'm afraid I don't matter. I feel like I was born unfinished. I want to go home, but I don't know where that is. And that's where the healing begins. Not in answers, not in affirmations, not in another round of life upgrades, but in the acknowledgement of what has always been there. The echo isn't a flaw. It's a thread that leads you back to yourself, not the self who performs, not the self who accomplishes, not the self who pleases, but the self who longs, the self who feels like an open question, the self who doesn't need to be fixed, only met with truth. Stillness isn't here to solve your emptiness. It's here to help you. Befriend it, to let you finally say, I hear you. And in that moment, the echo softens, not because it has disappeared, but because it's no longer alone. Because now, you're listening, and maybe, just maybe, that's all it ever wanted. When nothing matters, there are nights when nothing makes sense. Not your job, not your relationships, not your goals, not even your name spoken aloud in your own voice. You sit in your room, staring into a screen or a ceiling, and you wonder, what's the point? It doesn't come as a scream. It arrives as a sigh, a heaviness behind your ribs, a weariness so vast it feels ancient. You ask yourself, why do I even care about anything anymore? And sometimes you don't. You don't care about the future. You don't care about the people messaging you. You don't even care about the idea of fixing it. It's not depression in the clinical sense. It's not rage. It's not a breakdown. It's just nothing. This is where many people panic, because modern life has no place for nothingness. You're supposed to be excited, ambitious, on your way somewhere, evolving, improving, hustling toward your next milestone. But here you are hollow, disinterested, paralyzed in thought, and it feels like betrayal, like you're doing life wrong. But what if you're not? What if this state, this quiet, suffocating nothing, isn't a failure, but a signal, a painful invitation to examine everything you've built on autopilot? This is where philosophy begins. This is where the ancient questions arise, the ones that scared even the wisest minds. What is the meaning of this? Why am I alive? Why? Does it feel like none of this matters? These aren't weak questions. They're real. You feel them in your blood. And though you may not say them out loud, though you fear they'll make you sound unstable or broken, these are the most human questions we can ask, and maybe the most sacred. Nietzsche called it nihilism, the realization that the old values, the inherited meanings, no longer satisfy, that life, as it's been handed to you, no longer feels tethered to anything real. And that emptiness, that void of meaning, it isn't the end, it's the beginning. Because when nothing matters, you are forced to decide, will you crumble, or will you create? Will you sink into despair, or will you carve out your own meaning, one fragile step at a time? But don't rush, don't leap to solutions. Sit here for a while. Sit in this strange gray space where things feel weightless, not in a good way, but in a floating, off into nothingness kind of way. Notice the ache, the numbness, the dull question, circling in your chest like a slow-moving storm cloud. And ask yourself, without judgment, is this the absence of meaning? or the death of a meaning I no longer believe in. Because there's a difference. Sometimes nothing matters, because you've been building your life around things that don't nourish your soul. Sometimes the path you're on wasn't yours to begin with. It was scripted for you by culture, family, ego, and now, in stillness, you see it for what it is, a scaffolding with no building. You've spent years climbing, but there's nothing at the top. That's not your fault. You did what you were taught. You were told success would save you, love would fulfill you, achievement would complete you, but you've tasted those things, and still you feel the same hollow echo inside. So maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe the problem is the map you were given, a map that promised purpose, but only led you to distraction. And now, with the map crumpled at your feet, you're finally free to ask if none of this matters, what could? And that's the beginning of something dangerous and sacred. Because once you stop pretending, once you stop reciting borrowed dreams, once you let go of chasing meaning as a reward, you can begin to notice, not fix, not build, not chase, just notice. Notice what stirs you, even slightly. Notice what you return to when the noise dies down. Notice the way your breath slows when you hear a certain song. Notice the flicker of peace when you sit beneath a tree or hear a child laugh or write something that surprises you. Those aren't answers, they're breadcrumbs. They're not solutions to the meaning crisis. They're signs that something inside you is still alive, even beneath the apathy. The truth is, meaning is not given. It is not handed to you by a god or a guru or a slogan. Meaning is something you notice in stillness. Meaning is what survives when the lights go out, and when you reach the point where nothing matters. You are not broken. You are cleared. You are finally able to let go of everything that never truly belonged to you. The dreams you inherited, the metrics you swallowed, the rules you never agreed to. And once they're gone, there's room for something else, something faint, something true, when nothing matters. Listen carefully, because what remains is what might matter. Not loudly, not urgently, but quietly, like a match in the dark, like a whisper that says, you're still here, and maybe you are enough for now, even if nothing else is. The things you never say out loud, there are truths you carry that never leave your lips, not because you've forgotten them, not because they're unimportant, but because they feel unspeakable. You walk through life with a quiet script playing in your mind, a script no one else hears. It's there in the pauses between your sentences, in the sighs you silence, in the moments when your smile doesn't quite reach your eyes. You say you're okay. You say you're just tired. You say, it's nothing. But deep down, something inside you is screaming in a voice no one else can hear. I don't know who I am anymore. I feel like I'm vanishing. I'm scared that if people really knew me, they'd leave. I don't think I'm meant to live this way. You never say it out loud, not because it isn't real, but because you're afraid, no one would know what to do with the truth. You're afraid they'd dismiss it. Or worse, agree, so you keep it buried. You wear your practiced face like armor. You nod in conversations, while part of you floats away, watching from a distance. You stay busy so you never have to hear the full volume of your own pain. But pain doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It burrows, it fests it. It becomes a low hum, beneath everything, relationships, goals, even moments of happiness, until nothing feels pure anymore. Even your joy is tainted with the fear that it's not real, that you don't deserve it, that it won't last. And the worst part, You think you're the only one who feels this way, but you're not. So many people are quietly carrying the same weight, afraid to be the first to speak it. We've built a world that values image over intimacy, certainty over vulnerability, performance over presence, and in doing so, we've made honesty feel dangerous. But stillness doesn't care about appearances. Stillness only wants what's true. So when you finally let the noise die, when you stop managing how you're perceived and sit with what you actually feel, the real confessions rise. Not the curated version, the raw, unfiltered, inconvenient version, the version you've been trying to outrun for years. It might sound something like, I don't want to keep living like this. I've been pretending for so long, I don't remember who I was before. I'm terrified that this is all there is, waking up, pretending, falling asleep, and doing it again. I want someone to hold me, not because I'm strong, but because I'm not. These are not weaknesses. These are your soul's truths, not polished, not easy, but sacred. They are the parts of you that still have the courage to speak, even after being silenced, and they only come forward in the dark, in the quiet, in the moments when nothing else is demanding your attention. They rise like mist from the ground, subtle and cold and real. So the question becomes, what will you do with these truths? Will you push them down again, bury them beneath tasks and smiles and shoulds, or will you let them breathe? You don't have to announce them to the world. You don't have to post them, explain them, justify them. But maybe you need to say them to yourself. Whisper them into the silence like a prayer. Write them down and burn the paper. Cry them into a pillow no one else will ever see, because something sacred happens. When you name what's real, you return, not to the version of you that others expect, not to the one who performs and pleases, but to the self who is raw, cracked, alive, and still reaching for the light. And once those truths are spoken, something shifts. You realize you're not broken, you're just buried under years of shame, expectations, performances, under the myth that to be loved, you must be perfect. But perfection is not lovable. It's cold, it's distant, it's untouchable. What's lovable is presence. What's lovable is truth. What's lovable is the trembling voice that says, this is what I really feel, and the brave soul that lets it be heard, even if only in stillness, even if only in the dark. So tonight, maybe for the first time, you speak the unspeakable. You say the thing you've been too afraid to say, not to fix it, not to solve it, but to release it, to lay it down like a stone you've carried for too long. And in that moment, you feel something ancient return to your body. Not joy, not peace, that's honesty. And maybe that's enough for now, because maybe the path to feeling whole again doesn't begin with knowing the answers. Maybe it begins with finally saying out loud, this is what I've been carrying. The life that happens without youth, there's a strange feeling that creeps in, slowly, quietly, as if it's always been there, waiting for you to notice. It's the feeling that life is happening around you, not to you, not through you, just around. You see people moving. You see the seasons change. You see laughter, struggle, birth, death, love, loss, all of it. And yet, you feel like a bystander in your own existence, as if you're watching from behind glass, watching someone else live the life you thought would be yours. You're technically present. You go through the motions. You show up to work, return calls, remember birthdays, but it all feels distant, like you're observing, not participating. Like you've become a character in a story you didn't write, and worse, one where the plot moves forward without your permission. This isn't numbness. It's dislocation. You've drifted from your own center, slowly, subtly, until you're no longer sure where your choices begin and where the world's expectations end. You don't remember when it happened. There wasn't a single moment, just a series of compromises, adaptations, and silences. You stopped speaking up. You stopped asking questions. You stopped checking in with yourself. And somewhere along the way, you stopped belonging to your own life. Now you look back at old photos and wonder, who was that? You hear your own voice and barely recognize it. You say yes out of habit. And I'm fine, like it's a mantra. And even the moments that should matter, the celebrations, the breakthroughs feel like you're watching someone else enjoy them. You're there, but not really. You're almost here. Almost stillness brings this into focus. It strips away the movement, the performance, the audience. It leaves you alone with the one question you've been afraid to ask. Where did I go? You haven't disappeared. Physically, you haven't vanished. But something essential, something that once pulsed at the heart of your being, feels distant, like it's fallen asleep, like it's folded itself inward, waiting for you to come find it. You used to feel things more deeply, didn't you? Music used to shake you. Books used to awaken you. Love used to reach places you forgot existed. But now you drift. You observe, you survive. The tragedy is not that you've changed. The tragedy is that you've stopped claiming your life as yours. You've allowed routines to replace ritual, tasks to replace meaning, efficiency to replace intimacy, and in the process you've become invisible not to others, but to yourself. You miss your own soul. You miss being in your life, not just managing it. You miss being present enough to taste your coffee, to notice the light on your skin, to sit in silence and not feel like you're wasting time. You miss belonging to your own body, your own choices, your own breath. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. No one else can return you to your life. No one else can hand you meaning. No one else can reawaken what's dormant inside. No one else can decide to be here. That's the hardest part, and the most liberating, because if no one else can do it, then you don't have to wait anymore. You don't have to wait for the right moment, the right job, the right relationship, the right clarity. You just have to return. Not all at once, not with answers, but with willingness. Return to what? To your breath, to your questions, to the small moments you've been missing, to the discomfort of waking up, not just from sleep, but from forgetting, to the things that used to move you before you stopped trusting your own aliveness. Maybe tonight, it starts with one moment, one breath, where you're fully in your body, one blink where you're not a ghost, one choice that's yours, not because it's right or logical or praised, but because it's real, because it comes from that small, aching part of you that still wants to participate in life, not just spectate. Stillness reveals this disconnection not to punish you, but to invite you back to the life you almost missed, the one that's been waiting beneath the noise, beneath the hustle, beneath the numbness, the one that isn't perfect, but is yours, the one where you don't have to prove anything to belong, where being is enough, where presence is the only prize, where even in your confusion, your heaviness, your half-hearted hope, you are here, and here is enough. Here is the first step back into your own story. The fear of wasting your life, there's a fear that lives in the background like static, like a shadow that stretches quietly beneath your daily routine. You don't talk about it, you don't let it grow teeth, but you feel it late at night, early in the morning, in the silence between plans. It whispers the question you try so hard to avoid. What if I'm wasting my life, not just wasting time, not just making mistakes, but missing the whole thing? You're afraid that while you've been doing everything right, being responsible, being busy, being productive, something essential has been slipping through your fingers, something you can't get back. This fear doesn't shout. It lingers. It lingers when you repeat the same schedule day after day and wonder where the months have gone. It lingers when you stare at your phone for hours, numbed by scrolling, and then realize you can't remember a single thing you just saw. It lingers when someone asks you what you want, truly want, and you realize you don't know anymore because you've been surviving on autopilot. Because you've been checking boxes instead of asking questions. Because you've been building a life without knowing if it's one you actually want to live. And the terrifying part, you don't know how to change it. You fear the consequences of waking up too late, of realizing years from now that you were never fully here, that you were always waiting for some future moment, some success, some arrival, some peace, and in the waiting you missed now that you spent your one wild life performing instead of living, that you were so consumed with being enough. You forgot how to just be, and stillness brings that fear into focus, because when there's no task, no audience, no distraction, you see the mirror clearly, and what it reflects isn't failure, it's absence, the absence of you. But here's what you don't realize, not yet. The fear of wasting your life is proof that something inside you still wants to live it, not just exist in it, not just maintain it, but inhabit it fully. That fear isn't weakness, it's a flare from your soul, a last-ditch signal from the part of you that still dreams. Even if you've stopped listening, and it's not too late, because the life you're afraid of missing is still here, right now, beneath the layers, beneath the obligations, beneath the persona you wear when you think you have to be strong. Your life is not something you lost, it's something you re-enter, not with a grand gesture, not by quitting your job or moving to another city. You re-enter your life in tiny, sacred ways. You pause, you feel, you notice what makes your breath slow. You ask questions without rushing to answer them. You give yourself permission to want again, to want joy, to want meaning, to want mornings that don't begin in dread, to want relationships that don't feel like performances, to want days that feel like yours, even if they're quiet, even if they're imperfect. You let go of the lie that it's too late. Because what if the fear of wasting your life isn't the beginning of the end, but the beginning of awakening? And yes, there will be grief. Grief for the years you spent asleep. Grief for the dreams you buried. Grief for the self you forgot. Grief for the moments you lived with one eye closed. But grief is holy. Grief means you're alive. Grief means you care. And after grief comes clarity, the slow, staggering recognition that you are still breathing, and breath is possibility, that the life you feared you wasted might still be waiting, not with a bang, but with a whisper, not with fireworks, but with stillness. So tonight, as you lie in the quiet, let that fear rise. Don't chase it away. Don't drown it in distraction. Let it speak. Let it tremble through your body like a cold wind through open windows. And then, let it go. Let it pass through you like a shadow. Not a verdict, Because you are not behind, you are not too late, you are not broken, you are just waking up, and the first step to living the life that's truly yours is admitting that you want to dot the lie that you must always be okay. Learned how to hold yourself together. You know how to smile when you're exhausted, how to say I'm fine when you're unraveling, how to carry the weight of your own emotions in silence so no one else has to feel uncomfortable. You're reliable, steady, strong. But beneath that strength, beneath the practiced calm and the competent exterior, is something brittle, something fragile you don't talk about. The quiet truth that sometimes you're not okay, not in a way that's dramatic, not in a way that begs for attention, but in the kind of way that feels like slow erosion, the kind of way that makes even ordinary days feel heavy. But you've convinced yourself that being okay is your duty, because people rely on you, because you don't want to seem weak, because admitting your pain feels selfish or inconvenient or shameful. So you lie, not to manipulate, not to deceive, but to survive. You've internalized the belief that your value depends on your stability, that to be loved, you must be calm, that to be safe, you must be in control, that to be worthy, you must be unbothered. And so, you edit yourself. You shrink your emotions into palatable sizes. You learn which truths are acceptable, and which ones must be hidden. You become the one who holds everything together, even when you're falling apart on the inside. You make your pain invisible, and over time, you become invisible with it. Because when you bury your pain to protect others, something in you slowly dies. Not all at once, but in small, quiet ways. Your joy dulls. Your curiosity fades. Your laughter loses its edge. Your eyes forget how to sparkle. You still function, you still perform, but you're not fully alive. You're coping, and the hardest part, no one knows, because you've taught them not to ask. You've trained the world to believe your mask, and now you feel trapped inside it. Stillness peels the mask away. It doesn't ask for explanations. It doesn't demand that you fix yourself. It just waits, patiently, relentlessly, until you finally stop pretending. And when the pretending ends, you're left with what you've buried, the tears you never let fall, the fears you never said aloud, the longings you silenced because they didn't seem reasonable, the grief you minimized because other people have it worse. All of it rises in the silence, and it's overwhelming, but also honest, because here's the truth that no one taught you. You don't have to be okay all the time. You are allowed to break. You are allowed to feel lost. You are allowed to be unsure, to be tender, to collapse into your own confusion and not have a plan. Your pain is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be held, and it does not make you weak. It makes you human. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be real. But realness takes courage. It means being vulnerable in a world that rewards composure. It means admitting you need help in a culture obsessed with independence. It means telling the truth, not the polished version, but the trembling one that says, I don't know how to carry this anymore. And maybe no one else has told you this, so let me. That truth is enough. You don't have to fix it right now. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to turn it into a lesson or a victory or a brand. You just have to let it exist, because when you let your pain be real, you become real with it. So tonight, in this stillness, let yourself unravel. Let the weight fall. Let the mask slip. Let the pressure dissolve, if only for this moment, and say, even silently, I'm not okay. and feel the quiet power of that truth. Feel how it doesn't destroy you. Feel how it frees you, because once you stop pretending, you can begin the sacred process of rebuilding. Not as the version of you the world expects, but as the version that's been waiting in the dark, whispering, even now, even like this, I still deserve to be here. The quiet longing to be held, there's a need you rarely name, a longing so simple it feels too small to speak aloud. You don't want to be fixed. You don't want advice. You don't even want someone to solve anything. You just want to be held, not physically, necessarily, not always in arms or gestures, but emotionally held, seen, understood, and accepted in your most raw, unfiltered form. You want someone to say, you don't have to explain, I see you. You don't have to do anything to deserve this moment of rest. But the world doesn't teach you how to ask for that. The world teaches you to perform, to protect, to persist. So instead of asking, you bury that need beneath competence, laughter, distance, and then you wonder why you feel so alone. This longing shows up in strange ways. You might find yourself wishing someone would text you first. You might stare at your phone, rereading old conversations just to feel a trace of closeness. You might cry in the shower because it's the only place where your vulnerability feels private enough to be real. You might find yourself feeling angry for no reason, a kind of helpless frustration at how much you wish someone, anyone, could just sit with you and say, I'm not afraid of your sadness. I won't run from your mess. But no one says that. So you build walls. You tell yourself you're too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, too intense. You convince yourself you should know how to carry it all alone. And that's when the ache deepens. Not because no one cares, but because you've forgotten how to let them in. Stillness confronts that. Because when the distractions fade, your heart begins to speak. It doesn't ask for praise or progress. It asks for closeness. It says, I've been carrying this weight alone for so long, I don't want to be impressive right now. I just want to rest in someone's presence without fear. It's such a soft longing. It barely rises above a whisper, but it's sacred, and it's real, and it matters. But here's the hard truth. You can't be held if you never let yourself be seen. You can't be known if you keep hiding behind performance. You can't receive softness if you only ever offer strength. And that's terrifying, because to open is to risk, to soften is to trust, to be held is to admit. You need to be, but that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. There is a strength in tenderness that the world will never teach you. It's the strength to stand bare before another and say, this is me, not the curated version, not the filtered one, just me. It's the strength to ask, will you stay? And even if the answer is no, even if they don't know how to meet you there, the act of asking rewires something in you. It tells your nervous system that you are allowed to need. That needing isn't shameful. That longing isn't weakness. That the desire to be held is not a flaw. It's your soul remembering what safety feels like. So tonight, in the dark, with nothing to perform, let yourself return to that forgotten desire. Let yourself want to be held, not by someone specific, just by something real, by presence, by love, by life itself. And if no one is there in this moment, if no arms, no words, no voices come, then let you be the one who holds you, not the critic, not the fixer, not the one who plans and explains, just you, the witness, the gentler part of you who sits quietly in the silence and says, I'm here, I know it's heavy. I won't leave. It may not feel like enough, but it's a beginning, a quiet, trembling beginning. And maybe, for tonight, that's all you need. To know that you're allowed to soften, that you're allowed to need comfort, that even in your loneliest moments, you're never truly alone, because stillness is holding you now, and it does not ask for anything in return. The burden of always being strong you've been carrying more than anyone knows, not because you want to be a martyr, not because you think you're invincible, but because somewhere along the way you decided or were told that you had to be the strong one, the steady one, the one who doesn't fall apart, the one who can take it. So you did. You kept your voice even when it trembled. You smiled through the panic. You answered the call, kept the peace, stayed composed, and it worked. On the outside, people leaned on you, admired you, counted on you, but they never saw you. They saw the strength. They didn't see the shaking hands behind it. They saw the calm. They didn't see the storm beneath it. They saw someone who could hold the world, but not someone who needed holding, too. That's the burden of always being strong. No one thinks to ask if you're okay, because you've done such a good job pretending that you are. You've made your pain invisible, even to yourself. You've dismissed your exhaustion, suppressed your anger, minimized your sadness. You've told yourself it's not that bad, that others have it worse, that you'll deal with it later, but later never comes. And in the meantime, the burden gets heavier, not from one moment of collapse, but from years of quiet carrying, years of making sure everyone else is okay. While you slowly disappear under the weight stillness brings this to the surface, it lifts the lid you've kept tightly closed. And what pours out isn't weakness, it's truth. The truth that strength without rest becomes self-erasure, that holding everything together eventually breaks the one doing the holding. That being the strong one doesn't make you unbreakable, it makes you unseen. And isn't that what you feared most? That in always being the one who has it together, you've trained the world not to notice when you don't. That your strength has become your silence. That your resilience has become your isolation. But what if strength isn't what you thought it was? What if it's not about enduring everything in silence? What if it's about knowing when to stop pretending? What if strength is the quiet courage to say, I'm tired, I need help, I'm human, because there is a kind of bravery that doesn't look like grit or toughness. It looks like softness, like sitting in stillness, with your hands open, like letting yourself cry when there's no one there to comfort you, like choosing not to push through, not because you're giving up, but because you finally believe you matter enough to pause. And this pause, it's sacred. It's where you meet yourself again, the version of you who is tender, tired, true, the version who doesn't need to carry everything to prove they're worthy, the version who remembers that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, it's the integration of it. It's not being untouched by life, it's being shaped by it without losing your softness. It's knowing when to lay the burden down. So tonight, in this stillness, ask yourself, what are you carrying that no longer belongs to you? Whose expectations, whose pain, whose silence? What load have you mistaken for identity? And what would it feel like to put it down? Even just for this one breath. Even just for tonight. No performance. No duty. No script. Just you in the dark. Letting yourself be a person, not a pillar. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to fall apart. You are allowed to not know what comes next, and in doing so, you don't become less strong, you become more whole, because the real strength is in coming back to yourself again and again without judgment and whispering, even through tears, I'm still here, I'm still worthy, I'm allowed to be soft. The parts of you that went quiet, not everything inside you died. Some parts just went quiet, they didn't vanish. They weren't erased. They simply stopped speaking because no one was listening. Once, you were loud with wonder. You sang without shame. You dreamed without logic. You reached without knowing if you'd fall. There was a part of you that was wild, honest, open, untouched by fear or duty. The part of you that asked why not, instead of what will they think. And slowly, piece by piece, that part went quiet, not because you stopped believing, but because the world taught you to be careful, to be practical, to be acceptable, to be good, and in trying to survive, you buried yourself. Stillness has a way of calling those pieces back, not with a roar, not with a grand revelation, but with a whisper. It says, remember this. It shows you old memories, the kind that hit like ghosts. A toy you once loved, a song that once broke your heart, a feeling that once made you feel invincible, and you realize those parts never left. They were just waiting for silence to return. They were waiting for you to stop performing long enough to hear them. The truth is, we all abandon parts of ourselves, not maliciously, not consciously, but because life demands performance. We adapt to please, we silence to survive, we shrink to fit, and every time you betray a small piece of your truth, something inside you quietly exits the room, not forever, but until it's safe to come back. So tonight, in this stillness, ask, which parts of me have gone quiet? The creative one, the sensual one, the spontaneous one, the spiritual one, the one that once felt joy just from being alive. You may not have lost them, you may have simply learned to live without their voice, but that voice is still there, like a song humming through the walls. You just stopped listening, because listening to it means you might have to change, you might have to grieve what you compromised, you might have to make different choices, you might have to become someone more real and therefore more vulnerable. That's the cost of aliveness. But the cost of staying silent is numbness. So what would it look like to call those parts back? Not all at once, not in a dramatic transformation, but gently, with reverence. As if approaching a wild animal that once trusted you. You don't yell, you sit, you breathe, you wait. You say, I'm sorry I stopped listening, I'm ready now. You light a candle, open a journal, hum a melody you forgot you loved. You create a space where your soul is welcome again, not just your productivity. And slowly, that voice stirs. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply says, I never left. I was just waiting for you to come home. Stillness isn't empty. It's where the forgotten parts of you live. It's where the child who once danced in their own imagination waits to be remembered. It's where the you that wasn't curated, the one before the world asked for credentials and apologies, still breathes. And in that silence, you get to choose. Will I keep abandoning myself, or will I start listening again? Not to the noise, but to the voice I've been missing all along. The voice that isn't yours. There's a voice inside your head that sounds like you, but it isn't. It criticizes, it compares, it keeps a running tally of all your flaws, your failures. You're not quite enough. It tells you to try harder, to shrink, to stay quiet, to be smaller or louder or smarter or safer, depending on what it thinks will protect you from being exposed. And the cruelest part, you've heard it for so long. You've mistaken it for yourself. That voice didn't come from nowhere. Maybe it started as a parent's disapproval, a teacher's cold tone, a culture that measured your worth by your output, a religion that confused guilt with growth, a friend who made you feel too much, too little, or too inconvenient. Wherever it began, it left an imprint, and over time, you learned to internalize it, to prejudge yourself before others had the chance to police your desires, to filter your truth, to silence your impulses in the name of being good, not because you were weak, but because you were trying to stay safe, because somewhere along the way, being yourself became dangerous. So now, you live with a voice that mimics care, but is really fear. It says, "Don't say that, they'll think you're weird. Don't try that, you'll just fail. Don't rest now, you haven't earned it. Don't need anyone, it's better to rely on no one but yourself." And because it sounds like you believe it. You follow its rules. You let it narrate your life, moment by moment, as if it has your best interest at heart. But it does in single quotes. It only has your survival in mind. It doesn't want you to thrive. It wants you to avoid pain, but avoiding pain is not the same as living. Stillness exposes that voice. It makes it louder, at first so loud it can feel unbearable. You lie awake, and the inner monologue begins. You're wasting time. You should be better by now. You're just being dramatic. No one really sees you. Why are you even doing this? And in that flood of thought, you begin to wonder, what if this voice isn't the truth? What if it's just a recording, an echo of other people's expectations? What if your actual voice, the one buried beneath all this noise, has been drowned out for years? And what if, finally, in the stillness, you could start to hear it again? Your true voice doesn't speak in shame. It doesn't threaten or belittle or manipulate. It's quieter, wiser, softer, not because it's weak, but because it doesn't need to shout to be true. It says things like, "You're allowed to slow down. You've done enough for now. You're safe to feel this. You don't have to earn your place here." But it's hard to hear that voice when the inner critic speaks first and loudest, so you must create the space for it to emerge. You must question the voice you've been obeying. You must ask, whose voice is this, really? And wait. When you sit in silence long enough, you begin to notice the difference. You begin to recognize what isn't yours. You catch yourself mid-thought repeating some rule or fear or insult, and you pause. You ask, would I ever say this to a child I love? And if the answer is no, then why are you saying it to yourself? Because here's what's true. That voice in your head, it learned how to protect you, but it does not know how to love you. That is your job now. So tonight, as the silence deepens, give your true voice a chance, even if it's faint, even if it stutters, even if it only says a single word, enough. You are enough, not because you earned it, not because you proved it, but because the truth of your worth has never required a voice to validate it, only a heart willing to listen. Let that be the voice you carry forward. Let that be the one you finally believe. The addiction to become you've been taught to become, always become better, become smarter, become more disciplined, more productive, more likable, more together. You've been told that who you are is a starting point, not a destination. That peace comes after progress. That rest comes after transformation. That who you are now is only valuable in terms of what you can turn yourself into. And so, you chase it. You chase self-help and upgrades and routines and rebranding. You chase the next version of yourself like a mirage that promises to finally deliver wholeness, just a few improvements away. But stillness, real stillness, breaks that illusion, because in stillness, you stop becoming, and that feels like death. Stillness says, what if there's nothing wrong with you? What if this moment is not a stepping stone, but a destination? What if you've spent your entire life building a ladder only to realize there was nowhere to climb to? The idea of not becoming terrifies you, because who are you without the process of improvement, without the identity of the one who's always working on themselves? You don't know because you've built your worth on the scaffolding of progress. You've traded presence for potential, and it's exhausting. Every morning begins with a mental checklist. Be more present. Be more focused. Be more fit. Be more healed. Even your healing becomes a hustle. Even your peace is another project. You chase enlightenment like it's a race. You can win if you just meditate harder, read more books, journal more perfectly. But you forget something crucial. You are already here. This moment doesn't need to be fixed. This version of you doesn't need to be remade. This breath, right now, is not lacking. Only your belief makes it so. Stillness doesn't want you to give up on growth. It wants you to stop fleeing from yourself. There's a difference. Growth says, let's explore. Compulsion says, we're not enough yet. Growth says, this could be interesting. Shame says, fix it, hide it, erase it. And most of what you call growth, it's just panic, dressed up in productivity. You don't need another version of yourself. You need to meet the one who's already here, the one whose eyes you look through, whose body carries you, whose heart has been beating for you even when you forgot to notice. Ask yourself, who told you you weren't enough? Was it the school system that graded your worth? Was it the parent who praised results more than presence? Was it a culture that sold you success as salvation? Where did you learn that your only value comes from becoming? And what would it mean to let that go? Even for a moment, even for tonight, to sit in the dark and say, this version of me is not a project. This version of me is a person. Can you feel the difference? Can you feel the tension loosening just slightly? Can you feel the breath you've been holding soften? Because when you stop trying to become, you start to feel the quiet pulse of what's already here. The self who was never broken. The self who never needed a makeover. The self who is not a prototype, but a presence. Stillness doesn't ask you to fix that self. It asks you to witness it. And in that witnessing, a truth emerges. You were never meant to become. You were meant to be. So tonight, release the addiction to improvement. Let go of the finish line that keeps moving. Let yourself be a moment. Not a mission. Let your breath be enough. Let your presence be enough. Let your being, imperfect, unpolished, unfinished, be the final answer to a question you've been asking your entire life. What if I don't need to change? And the stillness says, you don't. You just need to return. The weight of unlived days, there's a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. You wake up groggy, as if you've been running marathons in your dreams. You move through the day, but every hour feels heavy, as if time is thick, dragging behind you. You're not exhausted from doing too much. You're exhausted from not being enough. Not in a judgmental sense, but in a deeper, more aching one. It's not your body that's worn out. It's your soul carrying the weight of days. you never fully lived. Moments that passed by, half noticed, feelings you muted. Ideas you never gave breath to, love you withheld, words you swallowed, sunsets you never looked up to see. Time keeps passing, and you wonder, was I really there for any of it? Stillness brings the question into focus. Where did the days go? Not just the busy ones, not just the hard ones. All of them. How many mornings did you rush past? How many evenings did you spend waiting for something, anything, to feel different? How many minutes did you trade for scrolling, stressing, pretending? And beneath it all, the deeper question, what? Are you postponing your life for you tell yourself you'll feel more alive later, when things calm down, when the timing is better, when you're healthier, wealthier, wiser, but later never arrives, and the unlived days pile up like unspoken truths? This isn't about productivity. This isn't about carpe diem or bucket lists or morning routines. This is about presence, about the deep ache that comes when you realize you've been missing from your own life. Not physically, not obviously, but spiritually, emotionally, viscerally, you were there. But not here and now, in the stillness. You feel the ghost of yourself passing through your memories like someone watching a movie of their own. Life detached, distant disappeared, but you're not gone. You're still here, and if you listen, really listen, beneath the guilt and the fog and the regret, you'll hear something, a heartbeat, a whisper, a faint pull toward presence. It says, it's not too late, it says, start now, start small, start with this breath. Because presence isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's 1,000 tiny homecomings, 1,000 moments of waking up again. You don't need to reclaim everything. You only need to reclaim this. So tonight, reclaim the day, not in some dramatic way, but by arriving finally into this moment. Feel your breath. Notice the sound of the quiet. Let yourself inhabit the room you're in, the body you carry, the life you've been ghosting. You don't need to change anything yet. You just need to show up fully, even in the sadness, even in the confusion, even in the dullness, because presence doesn't need a perfect moment. It just needs your willingness to be with what is. And when you do that, when you stay, the weight begins to shift. Not all at once, but slowly. The unlived days don't disappear, but they stop suffocating you, because now you've chosen this one. You've chosen to be here. For one evening, one moment, one breath, and that is not nothing. That is the beginning of everything. The quiet violence of comparison, it starts so subtly you barely notice it. A glance at someone else's life, a post, a picture, a story told with ease and lightness. And suddenly your own life, which only moments ago felt stable, begins to flicker. You feel it in your chest, a dull tightness, a whisper of shame. You don't name it as pain, not at first. You call it motivation, a reminder to do better, to catch up. But beneath that justification is something sharper, a wound being reopened, a question being whispered. Why am I not like them? Comparison is quiet violence, not because it screams, but because it chips away. Piece by piece, it dismantles your peace. You measure your progress, not by your own truth, but by how well you imitate someone else's highlight reel. You stop asking what you want. You start asking what will look right, what will sound right, what will prove that you're doing okay. You begin to shape your life in response to what you see, instead of what you feel, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you disappear. Stillness reveals this erosion, Because when there's no one watching, no performance to keep up, you begin to ask, who am I when I'm not comparing? Do I still matter? Do I still belong? Do I still know how to want what I want, without someone else's life distorting the lens? It's hard to know, because you've been taught that value is relative. You've been told, not always with words, but with glances, with metrics, with silence, that your life only has meaning if it matches someone else's version of enough. And so, you turned your soul into a scoreboard, and forgot how to live without keeping score. But the truth is, comparison is theft. It doesn't just steal joy, it steals presence. It steals trust. It steals your ability to recognize your own voice in the noise. You stop feeling grateful. You stop feeling proud. You stop feeling real, because everything becomes a performance. Every choice becomes a calculation. Will this make me more like them? Will this prove I'm not falling behind? Will this look impressive, admirable, safe? But you weren't born to live someone else's dream. You weren't made to be measured in likes or timelines. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness has no scale. So tonight, as you lie in stillness, let the comparisons fall away. One by one, let the imagined lives you've envied fade into fog. They are not real, they are not you. Release the illusion that you're late, behind, failing. Release the belief that someone else's joy diminishes your own. And come back, come home to yourself. Not the version shaped by competition, the version shaped by truth. Ask yourself, gently, what do I want when I'm not trying to keep up? What would satisfy me if no one ever saw it? What does my soul crave that no algorithm can predict? Your answers won't be flashy. They won't come in applause. They will come in silence. They will come like a soft remembering, as if you're meeting yourself for the first time in years. Because beneath the noise, beneath the measuring, beneath the fear, you are still there, and you are not behind. You are simply returning. The illusion of control. You've spent your life trying to manage everything, not because you're obsessive, not because you're rigid or power hungry, but because somewhere deep inside, you believe that if you can just control enough things, you'll finally feel safe. If you can control your emotions, control your image, control your schedule, control other people's reactions, control the future, then maybe, just maybe, the chaos will stop. The pain won't return. The floor won't fall out from under you again. You tell yourself it's about responsibility, about order, about efficiency. But that's only part of the story. The truth is, control is a survival mechanism. It's a shield, a fragile attempt to create certainty in a world that never guaranteed any. Stillness shows you the limits of that shield, because in stillness there is nothing to manage, nothing to fix, no way to optimize. You're left with what you can't predict, and that terrifies you. It's like being in a small boat in the middle of a vast, dark ocean. No oars, no compass, just the sky and the waves and the silence. You realize how much of your life has been a choreography of defense. You haven't been living freely. You've been managing risk, trying to outpace disappointment, trying to preempt rejection, trying to calculate your way into safety. But control is a promise the world never made, and no matter how tightly you grip the steering wheel, the universe does not take orders. So what now? What do you do when you realize control was never real, only a story you told yourself to quiet the fear? You breathe, you feel, you stop resisting what is, and you begin to unlearn the lie. that uncertainty is failure, because it's not. Uncertainty is reality, and resisting reality only deepens your suffering. You've confused control with strength, but real strength is surrender, not giving up, not passivity, but the sacred act of letting go, not because you've lost, but because you've finally seen the truth. You were never meant to control everything. You were meant to respond to what is, to dance with it, to move through it, to adapt and feel and flow and trust. Control is brittle. Surrender is fluid. And the more you release your grip, the more you begin to sense a strange, quiet power rising. The power of being with life, not against it. Tonight, in this silence, practice that surrender. Loosen your jaw. Soften your hands. Let your breath fall without trying to guide it. Feel the urge to manage, to plan, to resist, and don't fight it. Just notice, let it come. Let it go. Whisper to yourself, I don't need to know what comes next. I don't need to control. This moment, I am here. That is enough, because when you stop demanding certainty, you begin to find something even better. You find presence. You find peace. You find a quiet kind of trust that says, whatever happens, I will meet it, and I will not abandon myself. The peace that doesn't announce itself. You have been looking for peace like it's something you'll feel when you finally have it. You expect it to arrive with a shift, a moment of clarity, a release, a wave of warmth that sweeps over your chest and says, it's over, you're safe now. But that moment never comes the way you imagine it, because real peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It doesn't knock loudly at your door. It doesn't scream above your anxiety. It comes quietly, like a feather landing on water, like the sound of your breath when you finally notice it, like the absence of tension you only recognize in hindsight. Peace doesn't beg to be seen, it asks to be felt, and only when you stop looking for it, only when you surrender the search, does it begin to make itself known. You may have already brushed past peace today in the way your body settled, just a little deeper into your bed in the moment your thoughts paused, even for a breath before racing again. In the way your voice softened when you spoke to yourself with compassion rather than judgment. These aren't dramatic. They don't post well. They don't sparkle in the light, but they are sacred, because peace isn't an event. It's a return to yourself, to this moment, to being. Without needing anything else to justify it, you've been trained to chase peace like an achievement too. Seek it through success, completion, healing, perfection. But that version of peace is always just beyond the horizon, it says. When I finish this, when I fix this, when I understand this. But peace doesn't wait at the finish line. It waits here, in the stillness. You've been running from dot. It's not the absence of conflict, but the presence of acceptance. It's not a clean room, or a balanced bank account, or a perfectly regulated nervous system. It's the moment you stop fighting what is. The moment you say, I'm not perfect. I'm not complete. I'm not certain, but I'm here, and I'm allowed to be. You may not even notice peace when it comes, because peace doesn't feel like euphoria. It feels like relief. It feels like softness where there used to be bracing, like silence where there used to be static, like enough, not the desperate, fleeting enough that fades after achievement, but the deep, full-bodied kind that says, this moment doesn't need to be better than it is. I don't need to be better than I am. That kind of peace doesn't shout. It whispers, stay. So tonight, don't force it. Don't try to be peaceful. Just be here. Notice the weight of your body. Notice the rhythm of your breath, not because it's calm, but because it's yours. Notice the space between your thoughts, and in that space, feel the presence that's been waiting, not to fix you, not to impress you, just to be with you. That is peace, not a prize, not a performance, just the quiet truth that you belong to this moment, without needing to earn it. The things you thought would save you had a list, didn't you? Maybe not written down, maybe not spoken out loud, but you carried it inside a quiet inventory of things that would make life make sense. Things that would save you if I just get this job, if I find the right person, if I lose the weight, fix my mind, make enough money, move to the right city, then I'll feel whole. And you worked for those things. You reached for them. Some, you even achieved, and for a moment, just a flicker, it felt like it was working. Relief, excitement, that breathless sense of arrival. But then the high faded, and the silence returned, and with it came the question you didn't expect. Why? Do I still feel empty? It's a devastating thing to get what you wanted and still feel lost. It's a quiet kind of heartbreak, because you realize it wasn't the goal itself. It was the hope you attached to it, the hope that this would finally fix what's aching inside. But no job, no relationship, no number on a screen can reach the part of you that's been hurting the longest, because that part was never asking for a solution. It was asking to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved, not once you arrive, not once you improve, but as you are. Stillness makes that clear. It strips away the distractions. It lays everything bare, and you see that you've been bargaining with your own existence. You've been telling yourself, I'll deserve rest when I succeed. I'll be worthy of love when I'm better. I'll feel peace when I've earned it. But that's not how healing works. That's not how meaning works. That's not how you work. Because the things you thought would save you can't love you back. Not the way your soul needs. Not in the way that whispers, you are already enough, so what now? If the job doesn't save you, if the relationship doesn't heal you, if the body, the money, the lifestyle still leave you aching, what's left? You, just you, stripped of all your goals, your roles, your armor. And though that feels terrifying, vulnerable, naked, unmoored, it's also the beginning of freedom. Because now you can stop chasing. You can stop looking for salvation in things that were never built to carry your soul. And you can begin the quiet, tender work of being with yourself. Not fixing, not improving. Just being. You might cry. You might grieve the years spent chasing ghosts. You might feel angry that no one told you the truth. That no one said you were already worthy before you proved anything. That no one said you didn't need to earn rest, or softness, or love. But you can say it now to yourself, and that matters more than anyone else ever saying it to you. Because the only saving that counts is the kind you offer yourself. Tonight, lay down the list, all the things you thought would finally complete. You let them rest, not because they were bad, but because they were never meant to define your worth. Close your eyes and whisper, even if it feels false, I don't need to be saved. I just need to come home and feel, if only for a breath, the quiet joy of not striving, of not proving, of not chasing the next thing to make you whole. You are already here. You are already whole, and no outcome can give you what you've already been carrying. The self you abandoned to survive you, didn't mean to disappear. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to abandon yourself. It happened slowly. It happened quietly. One small compromise at a time. One withheld truth. One I'm fine when you weren't. One smile when your heart was breaking. One apology for taking up space. And it worked. You survived. You learned how to belong. How to be palatable. How to be the version of yourself that wouldn't scare anyone away. But underneath it all, something softer remained. Something wild. Something raw. Something true, and that part of you. It didn't die, it just went quiet. That self, the one who was real before they were right, is still there. Not polished. Not perfected, just honest. It remembers how to feel without needing permission. It remembers how to want without needing justification. It remembers how to rest without needing to earn it. But you've spent so long performing that you've forgotten what authenticity feels like. You've called it selfish. You've called it naive. You've called it inconvenient because it threatened the roles you had to play to be safe. But now, in the silence, with no one watching, that self stirs. And it doesn't say much. It doesn't rage or protest. It simply asks, can I come back? Now, this isn't about undoing everything. It's not about quitting your life or rejecting your responsibilities. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you who to be. It's about reclaiming the parts you buried because they didn't fit. It's about choosing yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you're yours. And choosing yourself will feel like grief at first. Grief for the time you spent away. Grief for the parts of you that had to hide. Grief for the cost of survival. But that grief is necessary, because what you're mourning is you. Stillness is where this return begins, not in noise, not in clarity, not in grand transformation, but in the quiet act of allowing what's real to surface. The parts you thought were too much, the ones you dulled down, tucked away, rationalized out of existence, they still remember how to speak. You just haven't listened in a long time, but they haven't forgotten you. They've been waiting patiently for the moment you stopped striving, for the moment you stopped performing, for the moment you became still, enough to hear them whisper, you don't have to be anyone else anymore. So tonight, ask yourself, who did I leave behind in order to survive? Was it the creative one, the playful one, the sensitive one, the one who wasn't afraid to cry, to laugh, too loud, to take up space? What version of me did I silence in the name of acceptance? And what would it mean to welcome them home? Not with judgment, not with regret, but with love, because you don't need to wait until you're healed, or confident, or wise. That self doesn't want a perfect version of you. It just wants your presence, your honesty, your yes. You are allowed to come home to yourself, even if you left a long time ago, even if you're afraid of what you'll find, even if you're unsure how to begin. Here, with stillness, with breath, with the quiet recognition that you are allowed to be all of you, not just the parts that survived, but the parts that longed to live, and maybe, just maybe, you're ready to let them live again. The safety you were, always searching for you, been searching for safety your whole life. Not just physical safety, not just security in money or shelter, but emotional safety, spiritual safety, the kind that says you are allowed to exist completely, and nothing bad will happen if you do. But it's a safety you've rarely felt, and maybe never fully believed was possible. So instead, you built your own version of safety, control, perfection, people-pleasing, self-denial, staying small. You called it protection, but what it really became was a prison. You learned early what not to say, how to read a room, how to monitor tone, how to adjust your volume, your truth, your needs. Until they didn't make anyone uncomfortable, you became an expert in managing other people's emotions, sometimes better than your own, because safety, for you, didn't mean being free. It meant being invisible enough not to cause trouble. And maybe you didn't even realize how much of yourself was shaped by that, until now, until this stillness, until this stillness, until this strange aching space where you're no longer performing, and what remains is the raw, unmet need to finally feel safe just being who you are. Stillness doesn't provide safety in the way you hoped. It doesn't give you guarantees. It doesn't promise that people won't misunderstand you, or that the world won't disappoint you, or that your vulnerability will always be met with tenderness. Stillness tells a deeper truth. True safety can't be given by the world. It can only be built within, and it starts with trust. Not trust in others that will come later. Trust in yourself that you will not abandon yourself again, that you will stay with you even when things get hard, awkward, or uncertain, that no matter how others respond, you will not run from your own truth. That is safety, the kind that lets your nervous system exhale, the kind that allows your shoulders to drop, not because the world is perfect, but because you're no longer at war with your own experience. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to want. You are allowed to say no and yes without justifying everything. You are allowed to rest, not because you earned it, but because you are alive. You are allowed to show up as you are. And if that sounds radical, it's only because the world taught you otherwise. But you're unlearning now, one breath at a time. Tonight, maybe for the first time, ask yourself, what does safety mean to me? Not the version I was taught, but the one I crave. Does it mean space to cry without fixing? Does it mean not being punished for saying what's true? Does it mean still being loved when you're not at your best? Whatever it is, begin to build that safety here. In stillness, speak to yourself as if you are sacred, because you are. Whisper, I've got you. I'm not leaving. You are safe with me. Let those words wash through your chest like warm light. Let them soften the parts that have been bracing for impact. Let them be the foundation you build the rest of your life on, because when you feel safe inside yourself, everything changes. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you are no longer a stranger to your own soul. And maybe that was the home you've been searching for all along. The emptiness that asked you to slow down you didn't fall apart because you were weak. You didn't slow down because you failed. You slowed down because something in you needed to be heard, and it couldn't speak over the noise. Emptiness doesn't always show up to destroy you. Sometimes it arrives to protect you, to interrupt the momentum that's been keeping you from yourself. You mistook it for depression, for laziness, for burnout, for lack of motivation. But maybe it wasn't any of those things. Maybe it was a sacred pause, a full body, soul-deep protest against a way of living that no longer served you, a spiritual whisper that said, this isn't it, and if you keep going, you'll forget who you are. Emptiness doesn't mean there's nothing left. It means you've reached the edge of what you can fake. It means you've run out of room for pretending. It means the life you've built with all its expectations, performance, and perfection has become too small to contain your truth, and so something had to crack, not because you were broken, but because you were finally outgrowing the mask. Stillness amplifies that moment. It asks, what if this emptiness is not a void, but a clearing, a sacred clearing, a place where the old has died, but the new hasn't yet arrived, a place where you are not lost just between stories. And in that space, the temptation is to fill, to reach, to fix, to do something. But what if the most important thing you could do is nothing? Not in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of allowing what you feel, allowing what you don't know, allowing the ache to exist without rushing to medicate it. Because sometimes emptiness is not a problem to be solved. It's a message to be listened to. Ask yourself tonight, what have I been rushing through? What have I been avoiding by staying busy? What parts of me have been whispering, please, slow down. You don't need all the answers. You don't need a new plan. You just need to stop punishing yourself for being tired. Stop interpreting your exhaustion as a lack of discipline. Stop interpreting your disinterest as failure. Stop interpreting your stillness as weakness. Maybe your soul got tired of waiting for permission, and so it forced you into a silence that could finally speak. You are not lazy, you are grieving. You are releasing an old version of life, one that prioritized speed over truth, appearance over presence, success over alignment, and in its place, something new is growing. You don't know what it is yet. You don't have to. Let it take shape on its own. Let the silence remain empty, not forever, but long enough for something real to rise, something not born of pressure or fear or expectation, but born of stillness. Because when you slow down, truly slow down, you begin to notice life again, not the performative life, the actual life, the texture of your breath, the ache behind your eyes, the pulse of longing in your chest, the flicker of hope, however faint. You feel the gravity of your own existence return, and suddenly you don't feel as empty, not because you filled the silence, but because you let the silence fill you. The moments you didn't know mattered, some of the most important moments in your life, didn't feel important when they happened. You didn't recognize them. You didn't pause for them. You didn't mark them as sacred, because they were quiet, unimpressive, ordinary. You didn't realize the way someone's hand on your back lingered a little longer that day. You didn't know that the last time you laughed with someone would be the last time. You didn't realize that the afternoon you sat in the sun doing nothing was the freest you would feel in years. These moments passed without ceremony, no spotlight, no announcement, but they shaped you, and now, in the stillness, you remember them, not with clarity, but with a deep, wordless ache, an ache for the things you didn't know you were living while they were happening. We think our lives are made of milestones, graduations, promotions, breakups, declarations, achievements, but more often, our lives are made of moments we didn't know to pay attention to. The slow mornings, the way someone said your name, the breath you took after crying, the silence between two people who understand each other. And when those moments are gone, something inside you whispers, I didn't know that was it. Stillness brings those memories back. Not always as images, sometimes as sensations, a warmth, a sigh, a scent you can't place. Sometimes it's grief, sometimes it's gratitude, but always it's a reminder. You are not just a sum of accomplishments. You are a sum of presence, of how deeply you were here, even when no one else noticed, even when you didn't notice. You won't always recognize meaning when it arrives. Sometimes it will come wrapped in monotony, sometimes in boredom, sometimes in stillness so deep you fear you're wasting time. But meaning doesn't beg for your attention. It lives quietly in the ordinary, and if you miss it, it doesn't punish you. It waits. It waits for the moment you become still, enough to see your life not as a path you rush through, but as a garden you tend to. A place where presence is the only thing that grows roots. So tonight, think of the moments that didn't feel like much. The night you stayed in when everyone else went out. The conversation that went nowhere but made you feel safe. The laugh that made no sound but shook your body. Maybe those were the moments that saved you. Not loudly, but quietly. Like a stitch in fabric, invisible, but holding everything together. You don't need to chase a bigger life. You don't need to optimize your schedule to be meaningful. You need to notice what's already here. The softness, the stillness, the light on your wall, the quiet rhythm of your breathing, the feeling of your chest rising, even now, even after all you've been through. That is a moment. That is your life, and you are here for it, finally. The ache that doesn't want to be solved. Some aches don't go away. They don't respond to logic. They don't dissolve with distraction. They don't soften with time the way you were told they would. They stay, quietly, persistently, sometimes in the background, sometimes in the center of your chest. You may not know what this ache is. You may not be able to name it, not precisely, but you feel it. A heaviness, a sorrow, a longing for something, or someone, or some version of yourself you can't quite remember anymore. And you've spent years trying to fix it, trying to label it, to outgrow it, to medicate it, to journal it away, to shove it down beneath productivity or wellness or affirmation. But still, it remains. Still, it hums beneath everything. Something is missing. This ache, this emptiness, isn't a failure. It's not a problem to be solved. It's a signal, not of brokenness, but of depth, of the truth that you are alive. Enough to feel the void, that somewhere in your being you still expect life to mean something, to hold you, to move you. That expectation, that capacity to ache, is not a weakness. It's a sign that you haven't gone completely numb, that there is still something sacred in you that resists settling for a life that doesn't touch your soul. Stillness doesn't try to fix the ache. It sits with it. It watches it shift shape. Some nights it's loneliness, other nights it's regret. Sometimes it's the ache of wanting something more. Sometimes it's the ache of having lost something you didn't realize you cherished. And sometimes it's just there, dot, with no story, no clear beginning, no resolution. And you are asked, maybe for the first time, to stop asking it to. Leave dot to just be with it, not as an enemy, but as a part of you that deserves witness. Can you do that? Can you stop trying to transform your ache into meaning? Can you stop trying to use it as fuel? Can you stop offering it up to people who won't know what to do with it, just so it will feel like it matters? What if it already does? What if its existence is its meaning? What if this ache is the doorway, not the obstacle, to the most honest version of your life? Because here's the secret no one told you. Some things are not meant to be solved. Some things are meant to be carried. Not forever, not as a burden, but as a truth. A gentle, haunting truth that says, I lived, I lost, I loved, I longed, and I can't explain all of it, but it shaped me. And that shape, that contour carved into your soul is you. Not lesser, not broken, just human. So tonight, if the ache rises, let it. Don't fight it. Don't question it. Don't dig for its origin. Let it sit beside you, like an old friend with nothing to say. Breathe with it. Let it move through your body like smoke through a cathedral, sacred, slow, unapologetic, and whisper, "You don't have to go, but you don't define me." Because even the ache is part of your becoming. And some nights, being with what hurts is the most loving thing you can do. The silence that knows your name there is a kind of silence that feels hollow, like something is missing, but there is another kind, a deeper kind, a silence that doesn't feel like absence, but like presence, a presence so vast it becomes sacred, not empty, but alive. And maybe that's the silence you're stepping into now, not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of recognition, of something ancient within you finally saying, "You've arrived." This silence doesn't rush, it doesn't entertain, it doesn't explain itself, it just is. And for the first time in a long time, you let it be. You don't fill it with thoughts. You don't interrupt it with scrolling. You don't ask it to perform. You simply rest inside it, and something shifts, not dramatically, not loudly, but gently, like a tide changing direction in the dark. And you realize, this silence knows. You wouldn't knows the thoughts you've buried. It knows the emotions you hide behind smiles. It knows the dreams you gave up on. It knows the version of you that still believes, even when everything feels lost. This silence has held every version of you, and it has never judged. It has simply waited for the moment you would become still enough to hear it, to feel it, to trust it. Because this silence is not empty, it is full of memory, of longing, of unseen truths. It is where the deepest parts of you have always lived, the parts you couldn't explain, the parts too soft for the surface world, the parts that make you you. And when you finally meet that silence, you don't feel alone, you feel found. It's strange, isn't it, that the thing you feared, the quiet, the stillness, the nothingness, was never your enemy, it was your home. But the world trained you to be afraid of it, to fill every pause, to fear every silence, to prove your worth through noise. And so you forgot what silence was, not an absence, but a return. Tonight, you remember what it feels like to be held without words, to exist without performance, to breathe without purpose, to be simply and fully, without needing to explain yourself to anyone, not even yourself. This is what real peace feels like. Not excitement, not distraction, not perfection, but quiet, deep, unshakable. A peace that doesn't need to be earned, only remembered so. Rest now. Let the silence wrap around you. Let it wash over the parts of you still trying to be understood, still trying to achieve something, still trying to make sense of it all. And as you let go, not of life, but of effort, you may hear it, softly, unmistakably, echoing through the dark. You are already enough. Not because you've done everything right, but because you've finally come home. The fear beneath the stillness, you thought stillness would be peaceful, but sometimes it's terrifying. Not because of what's there, but because of what might rise up from the depths. If you stop long enough to hear it, it's not the silence that scares you, it's the echoes, the thoughts that circle back again, the memories that drift in uninvited, the fears that have been waiting just below the surface. Stillness has no distractions, no shields, no script to follow. So what's left? You. And if you've spent a lifetime escaping that encounter, then stillness feels like danger, because it forces you to face what you've managed to outrun for years. There's a fear under the Fear not just of loneliness, or failure, or death, but of being known, not by others, by yourself. Stillness is where the performance ends, where the identity you've curated, the mask you wear, the role you play, fades, and what's left? Who's left? A self you're not sure you like, a self you're not sure you understand, a self with unanswered questions, unresolved pain, unmet needs. That's the fear, that there is something inside you that you don't want to meet. But here's the truth, that part of you isn't a monster. It's not broken, it's just unheard. Every part of you that still aches, that still feels confused or unlovable or too much, didn't form in a vacuum. It was shaped by experience. It learned to hide. It learned to cope. It learned to survive by disappearing. But now it wants to be seen, and the only place it can speak is here in the stillness, where the volume is low enough to hear your soul whisper, "I'm still here. Will you sit with me?" Yes, it's scary. Yes, it brings discomfort. But discomfort is not danger. It's a doorway, and on the other side is integration. Not the erasure of fear, but the acceptance of it. Not the banishment of pain, but the willingness to hold it without judgment. This is what stillness offers you. A reunion with the parts you disowned, with the truths you buried, with the self you forgot in your effort to be who the world wanted. So tonight, let yourself be afraid. Let your chest tighten. Let the thoughts swirl. Let the shadows rise. But don't run, just breathe. Anchor yourself in the knowing that fear is not final. It is a wave, intense, but temporary. And if you let it pass without resistance, what's left behind is clarity. Not total understanding, but enough to keep going, enough to stop hiding, enough to say, "This is me, and I'm not ashamed." Because in the end, stillness does not destroy you, it reveals you. And what it reveals is not something to fear, it is something to love, something to welcome back home, and maybe, just maybe, this fear you feel right now is the beginning of freedom when nothing feels real anymore. There are moments when life stops feeling real. Not dramatically, just subtly. Like a dream that lingers after waking. You go through the motions. You say the right things. You smile when you're supposed to. But everything feels slightly detached, muted, distant, as if you're watching yourself from behind a screen. You feel like a ghost in your own life. No panic, no breakdown, just a quiet disconnection that's hard to explain. You look around at your apartment, your routines, your relationships, and you wonder, is any of this actually me? It's a strange kind of emptiness, not loud, not desperate, just numb. You feel like a placeholder in your own story, and the world moves on. People laugh. Buildings go up, seasons change, but you float somewhere just outside of it, not absent, but not fully here either. You nod, you reply, you keep going. But a part of you is always whispering, "This doesn't feel right. I don't feel real. This is not madness. This is dismbodiment. It's what happens when your inner life and outer life drift too far apart. When the roles you play start to hollow you out. When the pressure to function overrides the need to feel. When you've been pretending for so long that the performance becomes the personality, and deep beneath it all, a voice in you is still asking, where did I go? Stillness has a way of breaking the spell. It doesn't fix the disconnection immediately, but it reveals it. It peels back the layers of automation and invites you to feel again. Not with intensity, not with drama, but with honesty, even if the only honest thing you can say is, I feel nothing. That is still truth, and truth is how you return to yourself. You begin by naming the numbness, not as a flaw, but as a symptom of survival. You shut down emotionally, not because you're weak, but because you're human, because something became too much for too long, and now your nervous system is trying to protect you the only way it knows. How? By disconnecting. But disconnection isn't permanent. It's a pause, a freeze, a signal, and when you listen, when you soften, when you stay, that signal begins to shift. It won't happen all at once. You might not wake up tomorrow with joy or clarity, but maybe you'll notice the texture of your sheets for the first time in weeks. Maybe your coffee will taste like something again. Maybe a song will move you in a way it hasn't in years. Not because the world changed, but because you showed up for it. Not the polished you, not the high-functioning you, just the present you, the real you, the one who finally allowed life to touch them again. You are not a ghost. You are not a machine. You are a feeling, remembering, aching, breathing soul, and you deserve to feel real again, one slow, tender moment at a time. The weight of unlived lives. There are lives you never lived, versions of yourself you imagined, hoped for, almost became. And sometimes the weight of those unlived lives is heavier than the one you're living now. You don't talk about it much, not out loud, not even to yourself fully, but in the quiet it haunts you. The career you didn't chase, the person you never confessed your love to, the child you might have been ready for or never were, the version of yourself that didn't break down, the one who never gave up. They all live in you. Shadow lives. Parallel ghosts of decisions you didn't make, and they linger. You scroll past someone living the life you wanted. You hear a song that reminds you of a city you never moved to. You have a dream where you're someone else entirely, someone freer, braver, fuller. And when you wake up, there's a kind of grief that follows, a grief without a funeral. Because how do you mourn something that never existed? How do you let go of a self you never got to become? Stillness doesn't offer you erasure. It won't delete the memories or mute the longing, but it does offer perspective, because sometimes what hurts most is not that you didn't live those other lives. It's that you never paused to honor the one you did, the one you're in now, the one that chose in your place, often out of fear, sometimes out of duty, sometimes out of survival. But even so, it kept going. You kept going. The truth is, no one lives all their possible lives. No one becomes every version of themselves. No one reaches every door. And if you did, if you had taken the other job, kissed the other person, moved to the other country, you'd still be haunted by the lives you then didn't live. That ache. It's not failure. It's a sign that you're complex, that you contain multitudes, that there are infinite selves inside you still waiting to be acknowledged, not acted out, but held with tenderness. Stillness invites you to make peace with your alternate selves, not by erasing them, but by sitting with them, by listening to what they represent, not just what you lost, but what you long for. Maybe it's not that you regret the past. Maybe it's that you've silenced certain desires for so long. They now return as phantoms, and maybe, just maybe, you don't need to chase an entirely different life to honor them. Maybe you can live a little more boldly. Speak a little more honestly. Move a little more freely. Now not to become someone else, but to become more fully yourself. So tonight, as the ghosts gather, don't fight them, don't judge them, don't beg them to leave. Let them in, let them tell their stories, and then look around at your hands, your breath, your heartbeat, and remind yourself, this life, this one right here, is still unfolding. You are not too late, not for presence, not for joy, not for small revolutions that change everything quietly, from the inside out. The path you're on is still sacred, even if it doesn't look like the one you imagined, especially then. The soul that's tired of pretend you've played so many roles. The achiever, the caretaker, the strong one, the one who's got it together, the one who never complains, the one who laughs things off, keeps the peace, stays productive, and after a while, it all becomes muscle memory, a performance so well rehearsed that you forget you're performing at all. But beneath it, something aches, not because you failed, not because you're ungrateful, but because you're exhausted, exhausted from pretending. You're okay, exhausted from living a life that doesn't match the rhythm of your soul. There's a kind of fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. It's not in your body, it's in your being. A soul-deep exhaustion that comes from the effort of being what others needed you to be, instead of who you truly are. You've smiled when you wanted to scream. You've said yes when every fiber of you was begging for no. You've kept it together when everything inside you was coming apart, and you did it because you had to, because survival demanded it, because love was conditional, because silence was safer than truth. But now you're left with a question. You can't ignore, who am I when I'm not performing? Stillness asks that question without flinching. It strips away the scripts. It removes the applause. It leaves only the raw, unpolished self, the one who's been waiting patiently. Behind the curtain, at first, you resist, because letting go of your roles feels like erasing yourself. But slowly, gently, you begin to see. The real you was never erased, just buried, quieted, shelved, not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to survive in the only way you knew how. And now, survival is no longer enough now. You crave truth. Truth is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or declarations. It whispers. It shows up in quiet moments, when you say what you actually mean, when you cry in front of someone who's earned your trust, when you admit you're tired, when you choose to stop proving and start being. Truth is messy, truth is inconvenient, but truth is freeing, and maybe, just maybe, the first step toward healing your emptiness isn't doing more, fixing more, achieving more. Maybe it's simply dropping the mask. So tonight, rest, not just your body, but your soul. Take off the mask. Let your face go soft. Let your breath deepen. Let the child in you exhale, the one who's carried too much for too long. You don't have to be on anymore. You don't have to impress anyone here. You are enough, even now, especially now. Not because you've proven yourself, but because you've finally stopped pretending, and that is where life begins again. The echo chamber of your own mind. There's a moment, maybe late at night, maybe mid-thought, when you realize something strange. You're always talking to yourself, always narrating, analyzing, anticipating, regretting. You rehearse conversations that never happened. You relive arguments that ended years ago. You imagine disasters that haven't occurred. You judge yourself in second person, like a critic in the audience of your own life. And it never stops. It's like living inside a hall of mirrors, every thought reflecting another, bouncing endlessly in a closed loop. This is the echo chamber of your own mind, and it's louder than silence ever could be. You think the world is noisy, and it is, but the loudest thing in your life is your inner voice, the constant internal chatter, the voice that tells you you're falling behind, the voice that replays every mistake, the voice that questions your worth every time you pause to rest. You've been narrating your existence for so long. You mistake the narrator for your true self, but that voice isn't you. It's a patchwork of everything you've absorbed. What others said to you, what society expects, what fear whispers when you're vulnerable, and if you listen too long without questioning it, you begin to live as if it's truth. Stillness gives you the chance to finally ask, who is speaking? And more importantly, who is listening? Because the listener, the one beneath the voice, the one observing the noise, that's the real you, the part that doesn't rush to judgment, the part that doesn't need validation, the part that simply witnesses. And when you drop into that space, that observing self, the echo chamber begins to soften. The thoughts don't vanish, but they lose their grip. They become weather, not architecture, passing, not permanent. You don't need to silence your thoughts. You only need to see them for what they are. Mental weather systems, storms of worry, clouds of memory, winds of speculation. They come and go, but beneath all of them is the sky, still unmoved, expansive. That sky is your consciousness, and when you learn to rest there, not in the thoughts, but beneath them, you finally find space to breathe, to exist without being caught in the loop, to hear yourself think without believing every thought, to let the echoes fade and the silence speak. Tonight, as your thoughts rise, and they will, don't fight them, let them play out, but don't chase them, don't argue with them. Don't grab hold of the worst-case scenario and spiral. Just sit at the center of the chamber and listen, not for the voice, but for the space around the voice, the stillness, the awareness, the you that was always there, beneath the noise, waiting, watching. Hold the hunger that isn't physically you eat. You sleep, you scroll, you work, you even laugh sometimes. But there's still a hunger inside you, a deep, gnawing ache that no meal, no nap, no distraction can seem to satisfy. It's not physical, it's not even emotional really, it's existential, a hunger for something more. But you don't know what that more is. You just know that it isn't here. This hunger is why you keep busy, why you set goals, chase milestones, check your phone 100 times a day, not because you're lazy or addicted or ungrateful, but because you're starving for meaning, for connection, for something to fill the void. And the world keeps offering you crumbs, temporary highs, quick fixes, empty calories for the soul. But after a while, those no longer fool you. You begin to notice how the satisfaction never lasts. The dopamine fades, the purchase dulls, the accomplishment feels hollow the next morning, and so the hunger returns. Stillness is not a solution to the hunger, but it's an invitation to examine it, to sit with it, to ask it what it really wants. Because most of the time, the hunger isn't for food or fame or followers, or even love. It's for truth, for authenticity, for something real enough to quiet the ache, not through stimulation, but through recognition. The truth is, you've been fed images of fulfillment that don't match the contours of your soul. You were taught that success looks like wealth, that happiness means constant positivity, that peace comes from achievement, but none of those have touched the deeper craving in you, because what you're hungry for is home, not a place, a state of being where you don't have to hustle to belong, where you don't have to earn rest, where your existence is enough. That's the nourishment your soul has been begging for. Stillness gives you a taste of it, not by giving you what you want, but by stripping away what never satisfied you in the first place. It shows you what hunger really feels like, not the absence of distraction, but the presence of yearning. And in that presence, you begin to remember you don't need to be full to be whole. You don't need to be busy to be alive. You can be hungry and still be at peace. You can carry longing without it consuming you, because sometimes the hunger is not a flaw, it's a compass, a guide pointing you toward what matters most. So tonight, don't try to feed the hunger with noise. Don't rush to fill the space, just be with it. Let it ache, let it whisper, let it remind you that the life you truly want doesn't come from more consumption. It comes from finally listening, and maybe, in that stillness, you'll begin to taste something sweeter than satisfaction, peace in the presence of desire. The loneliness you don't admit you're surrounded by people, messages, voices, posts, notifications, and yet you feel alone. Not the kind of alone that comes from physical solitude, the kind that creeps in when you're with others, when you're laughing, and yet your chest feels hollow. When someone says I love you, and something in you still doesn't believe it. When you're in a room full of people and still feel invisible. This is the loneliness you don't talk about, the kind you've learned to hide with a smile. Loneliness, you've been told, is a lack of company. But what if it's a lack of connection? What if it's not about being seen, but being understood? And what if you've spent so long hiding who you really are, that no one even can understand you anymore, because no one has been allowed to see you? So the loneliness becomes a feedback loop. You feel isolated, so you retreat. You retreat, so you feel more isolated, and somewhere in that spiral, you convince yourself that you're just too much, or not enough, or hard to love. But the truth, you were simply unmet. Stillness makes the loneliness louder, because it removes the distractions you use to numb it. It silences the outside world and turns your gaze inward. And what you find there is a heart that has been whispering for years, please, let me be known. Not on social media, not through curated words, but really known, flaws and all, mess and all, shame and all. The kind of knowing that heals, the kind that reminds you your pain isn't alien, your thoughts aren't monstrous, your longing isn't weak, it's human. Loneliness doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you are wired to connect deeply, honestly, soulfully. And that wiring has been short-circuited by a world obsessed with surfaces. You crave intimacy, not popularity. Resonance, not replies. Truth, not performance. And the ache you feel isn't failure. It's proof that your soul is still alive, still reaching, still hoping, still capable of love. Tonight, you may still feel alone, but try this. Sit with yourself. As if you were a friend. Ask the questions you wish others would ask. Answer the way you wish you could. Unfiltered, raw, imperfect. Show yourself the kind of presence you've been aching for. Because loneliness cannot always be solved by company. Sometimes it's eased by recognition, by seeing yourself so clearly, so gently, that you no longer need to beg the world to do it for you. And when you can sit with your loneliness, not as a punishment, but as a companion. You begin to feel a strange shift. You are still alone, but no longer abandoned. There's a warmth in that, a softening, a knowing, and in time, that stillness becomes sacred. When silence feels like judgment, there is a strange discomfort that creeps in when everything gets quiet. You lie in bed, no music, no voices, no notifications, and suddenly the silence feels accusatory, like it's pointing at you, exposing you, reminding you of everything you've avoided. In the noise, you can disappear, but in the quiet, there's nowhere to hide. It's just you, and some part of you doesn't like what it finds there. You don't fear silence because it's empty. You fear it because it echoes. It reflects back the things you'd rather not face, the decision you regret, the person you became to survive, the promises you broke, the words you didn't say, the truth you keep swallowing. And so you fill the space with sound, podcasts, TV, scrolling, music, anything to drown out the mirror. Because deep down, the silence says something no one else dares to. You can't outrun yourself forever. But what if the silence isn't here to judge you? What if it's not a spotlight, but a lantern? What if it's illuminating not your failures, but your depth? Stillness doesn't expose you to shame. It reveals the shadow you've been taught to fear, but which holds the key to your wholeness. The forgotten memories, the denied emotions, the anger, the sadness, the longing. They rise in silence, not to punish you, but to be felt, to be witnessed, to be brought back into the light. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this uncomfortable silence is where that process begins. Not in grand revelations, but in small moments of honesty. You admit you're tired. You admit you're scared. You admit you don't know who you are right now. And instead of fixing it, you stay. You breathe through it. You soften into it. You allow it. And somehow, in that allowing, the judgment dissolves. You realize it was never the silence that hurt. It was the parts of yourself you were taught to hate. The silence only amplified them. But now, in stillness, you begin to reclaim them, not to excuse them, not to drown in them, but to say, even this belongs. Even this is part of me. So tonight, let the silence be sacred. Let it peel away the noise. Let it show you what's real. And if it hurts, that's okay. Pain is not always a wound. Sometimes it's an opening, and through that opening you return to yourself, not as a project to be perfected, but as a person to be held, completely, quietly, enough. The ache for meaning in a mechanical world. You wake up, open your phone, scroll, you shower, eat, reply to messages, you work, multitask, answer politely, you check things off the list, you hit your steps, you go through the motions, and yet, somewhere, in the back of your chest, there's this persistent ache, a dull tugging, not of pain, but of pointlessness, as if your life has become a machine, and you, a ghost operating the levers. You keep functioning, but you no longer feel alive. Modern life rewards performance. It praises consistency, productivity, optimization, and so you adapt. You make your bed, you answer on time, you show up, you smile, but with each well-executed task, something inside you whispers, "Is this it?" Not in a dramatic, existential breakdown kind of way, but in a quiet, aching curiosity, as if your soul keeps raising its hand like a forgotten student in the back of the classroom. This is the hunger for meaning and the tragedy. No one teaches you how to feed it. They teach you how to win, how to earn, how to achieve, how to conform, but not how to matter, not how to make peace with a world that often feels flat, impersonal and fast, while you feel deep, tender and lost. And so you drift. You play the part. You color within the lines. And some days you forget the ache altogether. But it always returns in the pauses, in the quiet, in the stillness. Because meaning doesn't shout. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or announcements. It whispers. It's found in the tiny, easily missed moments, the warmth of tea in your hands, the way your chest loosens when someone really listens, the feeling when you create something that didn't exist before, the moment a breeze reminds you you're not separate from the world, but of it. Meaning isn't something you chase, it's something you notice, when you slow down enough to actually see. Stillness allows that noticing. It's not a shortcut to enlightenment, but it's a doorway, a gentle hand on your shoulder, turning you away from the frantic blur and toward the sacred simplicity of now. Because what if the ache for meaning wasn't a sign that your life is broken, but that it's ready, ready to deepen, ready to soften, ready to matter again? Not in the eyes of others, but in the language of your own soul. So tonight, ask yourself, what makes this moment real? What, however small, feels sacred right now? What part of you still longs, not for more stimulation, but for more aliveness? You won't find meaning in the noise, but if you listen, truly listen, you might find it here. In the stillness, whispering like a forgotten melody. You were never meant to be a machine. You were meant to feel, to ache, to love, to wonder, to be. The weight of being fine. How many times today did someone ask, "How are you?" And how many times did you reply, "I'm fine"? 2 words, simple, automatic, but under them, a universe of contradiction. You're not fine, you're coping, you're surviving. You're quietly enduring something that has no words, and yet fine slips out before you can catch it. Because it's easier than telling the truth. Because the truth is heavy, fine is armor. It's a way of avoiding the discomfort of vulnerability. It keeps things moving, keeps conversations light, keeps the people around you comfortable. But each time you say it, a tiny part of you goes unseen. Not by them, by you. Because the more you pretend everything's okay, the more you forget what it feels like when it isn't. And the more numb you become to the parts of you that still hurt, still long, still hope. You don't have to bleed in public. You don't owe everyone your rawness. But what happens when you never let yourself feel it? What happens when fine becomes not just your answer to others, but your answer to you? You become emotionally constipated, stuffed with unspoken truths, weighed down by unshed tears, smiling through inner storms. And then one day, it breaks a snap at something small, a shutdown that feels like depression, a silence that grows too loud, because fine is a slow erosion. It doesn't kill you, it just wears you away. Stillness doesn't ask you to confess to anyone else. It invites you to confess to yourself. to drop the mask when no one's watching, to say, I'm tired, I'm scared, I miss them, I feel lost. Whatever your truth is, let it rise, let it breathe, let it live, because when you stop gaslighting your own heart, you start to feel real again. Not polished, not composed, just real. You may worry that if you start admitting how you feel, you'll fall apart. But maybe that's the point, not to stay broken, but to stop pretending you're whole when you're not. Because sometimes healing begins the moment you say, I'm not fine, and that's okay. So tonight, give yourself permission to not be okay, not forever, just for now. Let the pain be what it is, not what you think it should be. You don't have to label it. You don't have to fix it. You just have to feel it. Let it move through. You like weather, let it teach you something about your depth. Let it remind you that fine is not the goal. Wholeness is, and wholeness includes sadness. It includes confusion. It includes honesty, even in silence, especially in silence. Conclusion. Returning to the sacred silence within you've wandered through the caverns of yourself tonight, through emptiness, through echoes, through longings and shadows you barely name. In daylight, you've stood before the mirror of stillness, and for once, you didn't look away. You didn't scroll past it. You didn't run from it. You stayed. And maybe you're not better. Maybe you're not healed. But you are honest, and that alone is sacred. What did you find in the silence? A hunger that had no name. A loneliness that wore a smile. A loop of thoughts that were never truly you. 1,000 moments you didn't realize. You were carrying like weight on your chest. You've seen how the world asks for your performance. But what your soul truly wants is permission. Permission to be quiet, uncertain, whole, even when cracked, and maybe, just maybe, that's what peace really is. Not perfection, not control, but the acceptance of your own being, raw, real, silent. There will be days ahead when the noise returns. When you forget everything you remembered here, you'll get swept back into the algorithm, the pressure, the applause, the ache for more. That's okay, because stillness isn't something you achieve, it's something you return to, like a breath, like a room inside you that's always waiting. A sanctuary built not of answers, but of presence. Tonight, you remembered the way there, and that matters. Even if you forget again, you now know how to come back. So as your eyes grow heavier, and the world fades into softness, let the silence no longer be something to fear. Let it be a friend, a home, a quiet knowing that beneath the noise, beneath the ache, beneath the questions that may never be answered, you are still here, and in that stillness, you are enough.